I'm Dr. Jeff Kieliszewski, forensic psychologist. Welcome to my YouTube channel in forensic psychology. Recently, I've had a lot of my subscribers comment and ask me to talk about or put my 2 cents in about the Epstein case and the Epstein file situation. If you follow this channel, you know that in July of 2025, last year, I posted a video here where I talked in depth about my involvement in the development of a television documentary on the Epstein case in early 2019, way before this case made national headlines and before he was arrested on federal charges. I'll give you a quick sort of overview of the backstory. So I was contacted in early 2019 by a television production company to work on developing a documentary for Netflix about Jeffrey Epstein. Now, at that time, he had not been arrested on federal charges. In fact, he wasn't arrested on federal charges until I think it was first week in July 2019. So the case that we were working on, the documentary, by the way, which became Jeffrey Epstein, Filthy Rich, and was released on Netflix in 2020. But at that time that I was working on working with the production company, the only Epstein case was where he had pled guilty to some kind of, and plea bargained down to some kind of prostitution charge in Florida in 2008, and then he did a little bit of jail time. This was for things that happened in his Palm Springs mansion, and the stuff about Epstein Island wasn't even out then. Anyway, when we were developing the documentary, we had all the police reports, the court records, some of the media accounts of that 2008 case. And the production company had hired a private investigator who provided us with a lot of other information, very interesting information about the history of Epstein. Go check the video out here and you can get more details about the other information that we learned. The episode's called The Jeffrey Epstein Case, Dr. Jeff's Involvement, Unanswered Questions. It was posted July 25th, 2025. So now, this case has obviously exploded all over the media. It's on constantly. There are all kinds of layers to this case and to this full story. So there's a lot of famous people, a lot of politicians, a lot of celebrities that are all connected to him. All the sort of crazy political stuff that's going on. Congress got involved to release the files. There's been fights over releasing the files, what can be released. It goes on, right? And for people trying to understand all of this, it's definitely overwhelming. So there are all these photos that are all over social media that supposedly came out of the file. And if you look at this stuff, you wonder what's real, what's not. There's just so much information that's released now. It's overwhelming, am I right? So back in the July video, I presented my sort of little theory and question of why there was resistance to even release those files. And one of my arguments is that I wondered if Jeffrey Epstein was a government asset. And the government did not want us to know that he was an asset. And that was sort of my working theory at the time. Now with all this new information coming out and going through my own Epstein file, yes, I have my own Epstein file from when I worked on that documentary, I have sort of developed my theory and my questions a little bit more. So here's sort of my newer theory and questions. So initially this case was about a rich guy flying underage girls across state lines, and these girls were abused. Then there became this question of, were these girls trafficked? And there were some famous people that were possibly involved. Okay, that brings on a lot of attention. Now there is a federal government investigation file that is over 6 million pages long. 3 million pages, 180 images, and 2,000 videos have already been released. And supposedly there's a lot more. The federal government has put a lot of resources towards this investigation, and I find that quite interesting. I know there's some high-profile people possibly involved, but this is a lot of government law enforcement resources put towards a case like this. So, why? Why is there so much interest from the federal government about this case of a rich guy trafficking, sex trafficking teenage girls? It seems like there's more resources put towards this, and maybe there's more to this than just this is a sex trafficking case. And I believe there is more to this, and it's more than a sex trafficking case. Now, when I worked on the Epstein documentary, we were examining his personal relationships and a lot of the mystery about how he accumulated so much money so quickly. One piece of information, that there were stories that one of Epstein's early financial clients, you would have never heard of him. He wasn't a famous guy, but he was an extremely wealthy guy. Anyway, the story from the private investigator was that this particular guy was closeted gay, and he did not want this to come out. There were stories that the private investigator discovered that Epstein would arrange sexual liaisons with his wealthy client, with male prostitutes. It's definitely kind of extra service than you would expect from your financial services guy, right? Anyway, this particular client invested a lot of money with Epstein, and this is early in Epstein's career. And this kind of helped put him on the map. And then this particular guy introduced him to his sphere of other people, and then Epstein's financial services business took off. Now, I don't know if any of this is in the released government files. Other information that we learned. Now remember, this is back in early 2019, before all this information from the federal investigation was even out. This was before he was even arrested on federal charges. The other information we learned is that Epstein had parties. Again, we're back to 2019. Initially, these were at his homes. I think he had a place in New York City, a place in Palm Springs, where he would invite famous people and actually pay some of them to be there. Now, at this party, there would be some of these trafficked victims, but also Epstein would hire prostitutes. The rumor that the private investigator heard was that these two residences were full of hidden cameras. And also we learned that eventually he started to move these parties outside of his two residences to his private island. Now, there has been reporting trying to understand where and how Epstein got all of his money. Some of these investigations find his potential finances are very complicated, with some non-traditional and non-typical revenue streams and financial holdings. So these investigations are basically trying to follow the money, and I think they're onto something. Now, so was Epstein's sex trafficking part of his business model? That's my big question. Did he have an extortion-based business model that made him rich? I mean, think about it. Did these rich and powerful men he associated with invest money and give him money or steer money into Epstein's direction, knowing that he had embarrassing information on them? And was the federal government an Epstein client? What do I mean by that? Well, maybe the government would pay for some of this embarrassing information on these rich and powerful men as a way to manipulate them. By the way, the government has done this before, but it would be a lot easier and more legal to collect this information by paying someone versus what they used to do in the old days, would set up their own sting. Remember J. Edgar Hoover? He had all kinds of stuff like that going on. So if you think about it, Epstein possibly had a version of this model early on in his career when he set up these sexual liaisons for his wealthy client. He had dirt on this guy, and this guy sort of helped him to develop a very lucrative financial services business. It made him filthy rich. Interesting to think about, hey? An extortion-based business model that brings money in, and you use sex trafficking as a tool or a part of that business. Anyway, go ahead and comment on the post if you think my theory is way off or you think there's more going on. I guarantee you there's more going on. okay? If this kind of content is something that interests you, like, subscribe, send this link on to others. Also, my subscribers, keep the questions coming. It's really helpful and really gives me, you're giving me a lot of great ideas to do some videos on. You can also follow me on other social media. I'm on Instagram, X, TikTok, and Facebook. Everything's under Dr. Jeff Kieliszewski, Forensic Psychologist. Thanks.